Welcome! Today we're going to embed items into our dice. In this case, a bunch of drone bees, because I have a beehive, and bees die all the time, and I can just pick them up off the ground, and might as well use them for something cool. So here we're going to use some Art and Glow. I'm going to use two different kinds of resins to see if it will make a difference as far as the clarity. I've had a hard time putting things in dice. Glitter always seems to sink, and bees always seem to float. Most things tend to sink. So what I'm going to do with this is make a batch and do about a quarter full from the bottom. Let that cure and then go in again with some UV resin. Place my bee or item right where I want it and then make another pour and cure that. I'm using the jumbo dice molds so that it's easier to show, but they're also easier to just pour the resin in. You could just use the pipettes and fill it up with a pipette, but in this case it's faster to just pour it into my big mold. You'll notice that I have a lot of molds and a lot of resin. I'm only going to do this test on 2 molds, but I made enough to just make dice out of the other molds, but I'm not showing that at this time. So once I get them filled, I'm going to put them in the pressure pot and let them cure and start with my next thing of resin. This one I'm going to be using my Clearcast 7000. And if you take a look in the mold, you can see the existing resin sitting in the bottom of it. There's a little line there. Now I'm going to use my UV resin and a pipette and just suck up a little bit of it and put a drop in the middle of my mold. Just enough to put my bee in there and have it right where I want it to be before I do my second pour. And you have to find some cool bees. So I'm going to go through and just grab 2 drones. They're bigger and probably won't fit in a normal sized dice mold, so I'm going to use those for the jumbos. I could just pick them up with my hands, but they like to stick together, so it's easier to grab them with tweezers and just grab them by the legs. Their little hairy legs like to attach to each other. So I got a little extra worker bee there, but I'm going to put him, actually her, because all worker bees are female, back into the container when I'm done. Now with my UV resin, I'm going to carefully just squirt out a little tiny bit into the middle there. And then I'm going to take my tweezers and grab my little bee. And I'm going to put him in upside down, because the way I have my molds, the D20 is at the bottom. And when I roll it, I want to see the top of the bee. So I'm going to put him in this direction. Make sure that he's in the UV resin right where I want him, and then I'm going to take my UV light and cure the UV resin to secure the bee in place so he doesn't move around or float when I put in my next batch of resin. This is also a good reason to have clear molds, because you can shine the UV light through the sides of the mold and it will go through it because it's clear. So each one that I do, I'm going to shine it from the top and around the sides as well. And just for fun, I'm going to turn it upside down and see if it falls out. Nope, it's in there good. So we'll move on to the next one. It is hard to see the UV resin on the other resin, which is actually a good thing because they're both the same color of clear, so it shouldn't be very noticeable that I used different resins or even the UV resin to hold that in place. Now all we have to do is take our resin and pour it in and fill it the rest of the way up. And once I have both of the molds filled, I will put them in the pressure pot and let them cure. To make sure that my molds are truly full, I'm going to use a pipette and just squirt a little bit into each one to make sure that it's overflowing out the top. And once they're cured, we're going to pull them out of the molds and see how we did. They look really cool, with a drone bee right in the middle of it. Overall, it looks great. There is no noticeable difference between the different types of resin, but if you do angle it at just the right angle, you can see the line of where the two resins meet, and also the tiny little drop of the UV resin, but you have to be looking for it and at just the right angle to see it. There are also some issues, as there are some bubbles in the bee hairs, possibly from the UV resin, as the pressure pot would remove any from the epoxy resin pour. There are some soft spots on one of the dice that isn't smooth, which I assume is UV resin either floating pieces or that got wiped off of the pipette when filling into the side of the mold. So now we're just going to clean them up and sand them so that we can paint them. I cut off the sprues and then I'm going to use a craft knife to very carefully shave off the excess and get it as smooth as I can before I go into sanding. Here are those spots that I'm talking about on the face of the 17 on this one. They don't quite sand smooth. If you haven't seen my other videos, well then go watch them! Well really, if you haven't, I'm using the sanding polishing paper from the highest grit at the top left to the lowest grit at the bottom right. And I'll just work my way from the highest to the lowest to get at that glass-like finish. And those are some nifty dice. And now it's time to paint them with some yellow and black to keep with the bee theme, and use my silicone tray, which is easy to just remove old paint. And we're gonna go ahead and paint the 20 a yellow color. And when I first decided how to do this, I was like, it'll be easy. I'll do all the even numbers one color and the odd numbers the other color. Here's the problem. All the even numbers are on the top half of the dice, and all of the odd numbers are on the bottom. So instead, I'm going to hold it at an angle on the tips, and then just go every other number. And then on the top side and the bottom side, I'll just pick some random numbers. If you haven't seen my other videos, go watch it! But really, all you have to do is just fill in the number with the paint, and then I use a paper towel that's damp and just wipe it off. So it's not really painting so much as stuffing it with paint and then wiping off the excess. Looks great. So then I'll just paint all of the yellows on both of the dice, and then the blacks, and we'll be ready. Overall, I am very happy with these dice. Very beautiful drone bee dice. And now we have a good idea of how to go about putting other items into our dice. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, make sure to click the thumbs up, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to my channel. Your support makes a huge difference. Please consider becoming a patron on my Patreon and get discounts at 3DM Tabletop on Dungeons & Dragons dice, miniatures, DM tools, accessories, and much more. Now go put some nifty things in dice.